A note to you, dear reader. You know how some folks meet cute at church socials or barn dances. Well, this isn't one of those stories. This here's about Margaret Thornton, who stepped off a dusty stagecoach in Wyoming Territory back in 1882 with 9 other women, all of them bought and paid for like cattle at auction. Mail-order brides, they called them, merchandise with marriage licenses. Most of those girls were young and pretty, the kind that make men stupid. Margaret wasn't. She was what folks back then would call substantial, a polite way of saying fat, had hands stained with ink instead of perfume, and eyes that had seen too much to pretend otherwise. But here's the thing about Samuel Cross. The richest rancher in 3 counties, he wasn't looking for pretty. What he needed, what he found, well, that's what changed everything. Sometimes the best love stories start with the worst beginnings. Hilljai. The tobacco juice hit the brass spittoon with a wet ping that made Margaret's stomach turn. She kept her eyes on her hands, folded tight in her lap, the torn gloves barely hiding the permanent ink stains on her fingers. Around her, the other 9 women pressed closer to the gilt-edged mirror, pinching their cheeks, adjusting their bustles, preparing for inspection. Number 7, stop your fidgeting, Mrs. Whitmore barked. The marriage broker strutted between her charges like a general reviewing troops. Gentlemen buyers appreciate composure. Buyers. The word hung in the cigar smoke that choked the Grand Hotel's parlor. Margaret had known what this was when she'd answered the advertisement in the Chicago Tribune, but knowing and living it, those were different animals entirely. Sweet Jesus! Would you look at that one? Rancher Jacobson's voice boomed across the room. Number 4's got hips that could birth a whole litter. The blonde girl, Emma, Margaret thought her name was, went scarlet but kept smiling. Had to. They all had to. Margaret shifted on the horsehair settee, her brown serge dress already damp with sweat, despite the morning cool. She'd been up since 3, mending the last decent petticoat she owned by candlelight. The other women had trunks. She had 1 carpet bag, light enough to carry but too light for starting a new life. All right, ladies, Mrs. Whitmore clapped her hands sharp. Line up proper. Numbers 1 through 10, just like we practiced. Margaret stood, took her place at the end. Number 10, last pick. The leftover, the ranchers clustered near the door, passing a flask, discussing the women like they discussed horse stock, all except 1. Samuel Cross stood in the corner, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. Margaret had heard his name whispered on the stagecoach. Richest man in the territory, owned 20,000 acres, wife dead 2 winters now. The other girls had spent the journey speculating about catching his eye, but his eyes weren't on them. They were on her. She looked away, concentrated on the warped floorboard under her left boot, counted the scratches in the wood, 43, 44. Gentlemen, Mrs. Whitmore's voice cut through the chatter. Shall we begin? The choosing started fast. Hendricks claimed number 2, a petite redhead who knew how to giggle just right. Olson took number 5. Number 4 went to Jacobson, who slapped her rump as she passed. The girl kept walking, kept smiling. 1 by 1, they were claimed. The pretty ones first, the young ones next. Margaret watched each woman leave with their new owner, husband. She corrected herself, though the distinction felt thin as paper. Well now. Mrs. Whitmore's voice pitched higher as only 3 women remained. We still have some fine choices here. Gentlemen, number 8 knows her letters. Number 9 can sew anything you need. And number 10, she paused, searching for something sellable about Margaret. Number 10 has experience with household accounts. Someone snorted. Gonna need a reinforced wagon for that household. Laughter rippled through the room. Margaret's jaw clenched, teeth grinding. Her father had taught her to add columns of figures faster than these men could count their cattle. She'd kept books for 3 Chicago businesses before the last one discovered she was a woman and fired her. But none of that mattered here. Here, she was just number 10, the fat one at the end of the line. "I'll take that one." The voice was quiet, but it cut through the laughter like a blade through butter. Samuel Cross set down his untouched whiskey and walked forward, his boot heels deliberate on the wood floor. "Which one, Mr. Cross?" Mrs. Whitmore asked, though everyone could see where he was looking. "That one." He pointed straight at Margaret. "The one in brown." The silence that followed was complete. Even the flies stopped buzzing around the spittoons. Margaret felt every eye in the room swing toward her, felt their disbelief like heat from a stove. "You're sure?" Mrs. Whitmore's voice cracked. "Number 8 is quite accomplished." "I said the one in brown." He was standing in front of her now, close enough that she could smell the leather of his vest, the horse and hay on his clothes, close enough to see that his eyes weren't black like she'd thought, but dark blue like deep water. "What do you call yourself?" His voice was different when directed at her, softer, maybe, or maybe just careful. She lifted her chin, met his gaze straight on. "Margaret, just Margaret now. Margaret." He said it like he was testing the weight of it. "Can you read?" "Yes." "Write?" "Yes." "Work with numbers? Better than any man in this room." The words came out before she could stop them. Someone behind Cross chuckled mean, but Cross didn't laugh. He studied her face like he was reading something written there. "My ranch has 3 years of account books that nobody can make sense of. Previous wife couldn't. I can't. Been bleeding money and can't find where. I can find it. You sound certain. Numbers don't lie. Mr. Cross, people do. But numbers always tell the truth if you know how to listen." He was quiet for a long moment. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Then he turned to Mrs. Whitmore. "This one. Draw up the papers." "But, Mr. Cross," Jacobson called out, already drunk, though it wasn't yet noon, "you could have any of them. Why in hell would you want—" "Because I don't need pretty." Cross didn't turn around, kept his eyes on Margaret. "I need someone who can think. Pretty is useless when the bank comes calling. Pretty doesn't fix broken ledgers or find stolen money." He paused, then added loud enough for everyone to hear, "And gentlemen, if you think your pretty new wives are going to save your failing ranches, you're bigger fools than I took you for." The room erupted in angry mutters, but Cross was already walking toward the door. He stopped, looked back at Margaret. "Get your things. We've got 20 miles to cover before dark." Margaret moved to follow, then hesitated. The other 2 unclaimed women stood frozen, terror clear on their faces. Number 8 was crying silently. Number 9 looked ready to bolt. "Mr. Cross," Margaret called out. He turned. "Peterson and Williams are still looking for brides. Aren't they good men? I heard. Just couldn't make it to town today." Cross studied her for a moment, then nodded slow. "They are, Mrs. Whitmore. Send word to Peterson and Williams. Tell them to come quick if they want wives." Margaret walked past him, past the sneering faces, past the tobacco stains and judgment. At the door, she heard Jacobson say, "You'll regret this." "Cross, that fat sow isn't worth—" The sound of Cross's fist hitting flesh was quick and final. Margaret didn't turn around, but she heard the thud of Jacobson hitting the floor. "Any other man wants to discuss my business decisions." Cross's voice was calm as Sunday morning. Silence. "Good. Margaret, your bag." She retrieved her single carpet bag from the corner. He took it from her without comment about its lightness, without the pity she'd expected, just took it and headed for the door. Outside, The Wyoming sun was climbing toward noon, harsh and honest. His wagon waited, loaded with supplies and those mysterious ledgers she'd glimpsed sliding around the bed. She climbed up without waiting for help, settled herself on the hard bench. Cross climbed up beside her, took the reins. They'd made it 2 blocks before he spoke. "You always speak up for others, when it costs me nothing and saves them everything." "Yes, could cost you to made enemies in there. Mr. Cross, I was number 10 in a line of 10 women. I already had enemies. Least now I've got reasons for them." For the first time, she saw something that might have been a smile touch the corner of his mouth. "Call me Samuel. We've got 20 miles to figure each other out. Might as well start honest." The wagon rolled out of Willow Creek, leaving behind the laughter and judgment. Ahead stretched endless grass and sky, and somewhere at the end of it, 20,000 acres of problems that needed solving. Margaret adjusted her torn gloves, straightened her back, and began to think about numbers. They'd always been her salvation before. Maybe they could be again. But first, she needed to know why the richest man in Wyoming territory had just chosen the least desirable bride in the room, and why he'd looked at her like he'd been looking for her all along. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The wagon wheel caught a rut. Margaret's teeth clicked together, tongue bitten sharp enough to taste copper. 5 miles out of town now, nothing but sage and silence stretching ahead. "Your hands," Samuel's voice came sudden. "The ink stains. How long?" Margaret pulled the torn gloves tighter. "Since I was 12. Father taught me his trade before the whiskey took him." "What trade?" "Bookkeeping. Accounts for the stockyards. Then 2 dry goods stores." The wagon jolted again. A ledger slid forward in the bed, pages flapping like broken wings. Lost the last position when they discovered their M. Thompson was Margaret, not Michael. Samuel made a sound that might have been disgust. His knuckles were starting to purple from hitting Jacobson. "That why you answered the advertisement? Eating regular seemed worth the price." As Margaret watched a hawk circle overhead, waiting for something to die. "Why'd you really pick me?" The leather reins creaked in his grip. "Ranch is bleeding money. 3 years of receipts that don't add cattle counts off. Water rights disappearing on paper, but the water's still there." He shifted on the bench. "Pretty wife couldn't help. Spent her days planning dinner parties for people who never came. She's dead now. Pneumonia, 2 winters back." Margaret counted 10 more ruts before speaking. "You didn't answer my question." "Which question?" "Why me?" "You could have hired an accountant from Denver." Samuel turned his head just enough that she could see his profile against the bright sky. "Tried that. 2 of them. They found what someone wanted them to find. Told me everything was fine while I lost 500 head. You think they were paid off?" "I think a wife has more reason to find the truth than a hired man." The wagon crested a rest. There, Margaret's breath stopped. The ranch spread below them like a broken promise. The main house stood solid, 2 stories of respectability with glass windows that caught the light. But everything else was wrong. The garden behind the house was dead brown. The nearest fields looked like starved Zemle. No, that wasn't English. Like her grandmother's words creeping in. Starved land, skeletal. 20,000 acres, Samuel said. And dying by inches. Margaret's eyes caught on something else. The barn door hung open. Through it, she could see a man watching them approach. Big man, beard thick as winter fur. "Who's that?" "Briggs. Foreman." The man didn't wave, didn't move, just watched. Margaret's stomach went tight. Those ledgers sliding around the wagon bed, she could see numbers penciled on the exposed pages. But the handwriting changed halfway down one column. 2 different hands, same ledger. Briggs stepped out of the barn as the wagon rolled closer. Tobacco juice darkened the dirt at his feet. His eyes tracked Margaret like she was something that might bite. "Boss?" The word came out flat, no welcome in it. "Briggs." Samuel pulled the wagon to a stop near the house. "This is Margaret, my wife." The foreman's mouth worked around his tobacco. "Thought you were bringing back supplies." "I did." Margaret felt the insult land. Kept her face stone. The ledger at her feet had slipped further forward. She could see the columns now. Cattle sales from last month. The numbers in Briggs' hand showed 40 head sold. The correction below, in different ink, showed 20 cattle. At current price, that was near $300. Gone. "Help me with the supplies," Samuel said to Briggs. Not a request. "Got the boys for that?" "Then get them." Briggs spat again. Brown streamed just missing the wagon wheel. His boots scraped across packed dirt as he headed for the bunkhouse. Samuel climbed down, came around to Margaret's side. He didn't offer his hand up to help her. Good, she didn't want it. She climbed down herself, boots hitting ground hard enough to jar her teeth again. The house door stood open. Through it, darkness and the smell of neglect, dust and old bacon grease, and something sour, like milk left too long. "I'll show you inside," Samuel said. "The ledger's first." He stopped. "What?" "The ledger's in the wagon. They need to come inside before the dew gets them tonight." Margaret kept her voice level. Paper holds numbers better when it's dry. Samuel looked at her long enough that she could count the lines around his eyes. Sun damage, years of squinting at distant cattle. "You saw something?" Not a question. "I see plenty. Question is what you want done about it." Bootsteps interrupted. 3 ranch hands approached from the bunkhouse, Briggs trailing behind. Young men barely whiskered. They looked at Margaret, then away, then back again, like they couldn't help it. "Get the supplies in," Samuel told them. "Kitchen stores first. The ledgers go to my study." "I'll take the ledgers," Briggs said, already reaching. "No." Margaret's voice cut sharp. "I'll take them." Briggs' hand stopped. "Don't believe the lady trusts me, boss." "I don't trust anyone yet." Margaret gathered 3 ledgers against her chest, the leather covers slick with age and handling. "Trust is earned with numbers that add proper." One of the young hands coughed to cover a laugh. Briggs' face went dark as old blood. "Been keeping cross-ranch books for 8 years, Briggs said. "Then you'll have no trouble showing me how." Margaret headed for the house. Behind her, silence thick as the dust on her skirts. The front door opened into a parlor that had been beautiful once. Now, spiderwebs laced the corners and dust sheets covered furniture like shrouds. Margaret's boots echoed on wood floors that hadn't seen wax in 2 winters. Through an archway, she glimpsed the kitchen, dishes stacked unwashed, flies circling. "Studies upstairs." Samuel's voice came from behind her. "Close. First door on the right." The stairs creaked under her weight. Each step announced her presence to the empty house. At the landing, she stopped. 4 doors. The first stood open. Samuel's study. Papers scattered like snow across every surface. The second, closed. The third, ajar enough to show a bedroom with a rose-patterned coverlet. The fourth had a ribbon tied to its handle. Pink satin, edges brown with age. "My wife's room," Samuel said. "Haven't been in since she died." Margaret didn't respond. She entered the study, set the ledgers on the desk, careful as eggs. The desk itself was quality work, oak, solid, with dozens of small drawers, but papers spilled from every drawer, covered every surface. Receipts, contracts, correspondence. Years of business abandoned to chaos. She tried, Samuel said from the doorway. Spent weeks in here trying to make sense of it. Did she know numbers? She knew dinner parties. She knew which fork went where. His boots shifted. I thought that would be enough. Thought I could handle the business side. Margaret picked up a receipt. Hay delivery. Signed by Briggs. 200 bales at market price. She picked up another. Same date, different paper. Hay delivery. 150 bales. 50 bales difference. At drought prices, that was theft, clean and simple. You need to choose, she said. Choose what? Whether you want a wife who makes you comfortable or one who makes you rich again. The floor creaked as he came closer. She could smell him now, horse and leather and something sharp like sage. What makes you think you can do either? Margaret turned to face him. This close, she could see the exact color of his eyes, not dark blue, but gray blue, like sky before a storm. Your foreman's been robbing you. These receipts prove it. Question is whether you want to know how much and for how long. His jaw worked. You're certain. Numbers don't lie. She set down the receipt. But I need 3 things if you want me to prove it. Name them. First, every piece of paper from the last 3 years. Everything. Even the ones Briggs says got lost or burned. Done. Second, I need to talk to your hands. Alone. Without Briggs knowing. Samuel's eyes stood narrowed. That could get complicated. Truth usually is. And third, Margaret looked at the chaos of papers, then back at him. I need you to back me. When I find what I'm going to find, and Briggs comes at me, and he will, I need to know you'll choose the numbers over the man who's been with you 8 years. You're that certain he's stealing? I'm certain someone is. The only question is whether he's working alone. Samuel was quiet long enough that Margaret could hear flies hitting the window glass. Then he reached past her, pulled open the desk's top drawer. Inside, a Colt lay on top of more papers. My wife was afraid of guns. He said, Are you? Margaret looked at the weapon. Her father had carried one similar before the drink took his aim along with everything else. I'm afraid of being shot. There's a difference. Can you use one? I can learn. Samuel closed the drawer. Supper's at 6. We'll discuss terms after. He left her there with the ledgers and lies. Margaret stood in the failing light, looking at years of theft spread across the desk. Through the window, she could see Briggs talking to the ranch hands, his big hands moving sharp in the air. She picked up another ledger, this one from 2 years back. The handwriting changed not halfway through, but every few pages, like someone kept replacing the numbers, writing over truth with fiction. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, painting the dead garden gold. From somewhere in the house came footsteps. Samuel moving through rooms that had been silent too long. Margaret opened the ledger to January. Cattle inventory, 2,000 head. She flipped to December, same year. Cattle inventory, 100 head, but the sales receipts showed only 300 sold. 200 cattle didn't just vanish. She heard boots on the stairs, heavy ones, not Samuel's. Briggs appeared in the doorway, tobacco bulging his cheek. Little lady should be in the kitchen, he said. That's where wives belong. Margaret didn't look up from the ledger. Mr. Cross asked me to review these accounts. Mr. Cross isn't here right now. Briggs stepped into the room. The floorboard under his left boot groaned. Just you and me having a talk. The tobacco smell rolled off him thick as fog. Margaret kept her finger on the column of numbers. 200 missing cattle. She turned the page. You deaf woman. I hear fine. Another page. More changed numbers. What I don't hear is Mr. Cross telling me to stop. Briggs's shadow fell across the desk. You think you're smart? I think numbers add to specific sums. Margaret finally looked up. This close, she could see the broken veins across his nose, drinker's marks. These don't add. His hand slammed flat on the ledger, dirt caked under his fingernails, worked deep into the creases of his knuckles. Accidents happen on ranches, especially to folks who don't know their place. That a threat, Mr. Briggs. That's advice. Margaret! Samuel's voice came from the stairs. Briggs' hand lifted off the ledger. He stepped back, face rearranging into something that might pass for pleasant. Samuel appeared in the doorway, took in the scene. Briggs too close, Margaret's straight spine, the ledger between them. Problem? Just introducing myself proper, Briggs said, making the lady feel welcome. Samuel's eyes stayed on Margaret. You feel welcome. Getting there. She turned another page in the ledger, deliberate. Mr. Briggs was just leaving. The foreman's jaw worked the tobacco. He looked at Samuel, waiting. Samuel stepped aside from the doorway. Clear path out. Got nut rounds to check, Briggs said. He walked past Samuel. Boots heavy? At the stairs. He stopped. Boss, that new bull's been acting up. Might need to put him down. He was fine this morning, Samuel said. Things change quick. Briggs went down the stairs. The front door slammed. Samuel moved into the study. He threatened you. He suggested accidents happen. They do. Not to me. Margaret closed the ledger. Show me the house. I need to know what I'm working with. Samuel studied her face. Looking for fear, maybe? He wouldn't find it. Fear was luxury she couldn't afford. This way. He led her back to the landing. The door with the pink ribbon stayed closed as they passed. The third door opened to a bedroom that smelled of lavender gone stale. Rose coverlet on the bed. Dust thick on every surface. China dolls arranged on a shelf, their glass eyes catching the late light. Guest room, Samuel said. Yours if you want it. Margaret walked to the window. View of the dead garden below, and beyond that, the barn where Briggs had disappeared. Locks. All the doors locked from inside. She tested the window. It stuck, then gave with a shriek. Cool air rushed in, carrying the smell of sage and distance. I'll take it. Don't want to see the rest first. A lock and a window that opens. What else matters? They continued the tour. A second guest room, smaller, facing the fields. A water closet with running water, luxury she hadn't expected. Then the closed door with the ribbon. Samuel's hand hesitated on the handle. Haven't opened this since. Then don't. Margaret moved past him. Show me the kitchen. Back downstairs. The kitchen was worse close-it up. Dishes crusted with old food, mouse droppings along the baseboards. The big cast-iron range cold and rust-spotted. But the bones were good. Solid construction, plenty of space, windows facing east for morning light. The hands eating the bunkhouse, Samuel said. I've been taking meals there, too. Not anymore. Margaret ran her finger along the counter, came away with grease thick as paint. You eat here. They'll respect the house. You hide in the bunkhouse. They'll treat this place like it's already dead. You going to cook? I'm going to try. She opened a cupboard, empty, except for a spider's web. Where's the food stores, root cellar, back of the house? They went out the back door. The dead garden stretched before them, rows of nothing marked by broken stakes. The soil looked gray as ash. Margaret knelt, grabbed a handful, dry. But underneath, if she dug deeper, was she a gardener? Your wife? She tried, but planted roses mostly. Decorative things. Roses don't feed anyone. Then Margaret stood, dusting her hands. This soil's not dead, just neglected. The root cellar doors angled out from the ground. Wood, weathered silver. Samuel pulled them open. The smell hit immediate. Potatoes going cold, onions sprouting, but deeper in. Preserves lined the shelves. Canned goods. Sacks of flour and cornmeal, enough to work with, Margaret said. Back in the kitchen, she pumped water into a pot, set it to heat on the range after lighting the fire. Found coffee in a tin, measured it careful. While it boiled, she cleared face at the scarred wooden table. Sit, she told Samuel. He sat. The chair creaked under his weight. Margaret poured coffee into 2 cups that she'd rinsed clean, set them on the table, then sat across from him. The coffee was bitter, too long in the tin, but hot. Terms, she said. What kind of terms? The kind that keep us both honest. And Margaret wrapped her hands around the cup, heat seeping through. I need 3 months, 90 days to go through every piece of paper, every receipt, every contract, find where the bleeding is and stop it. And during those 90 days, I work your books, I cook meals, I make this house livable again. She met his eyes straight, but that's all. No wedding night, no wifely duties. Not until we both know what we're choosing. Samuel's face didn't change. And after 90 days, we see where we stand. If I've saved your ranch, if you still want a wife instead of just an accountant, then we discuss marriage real, not what Mrs. Whitmore sold you, but what we decide between us. And if you haven't saved it, then you put me on a stage back east with fair wages for the work done. Samuel was quiet. The coffee cooled between them. Through the window, dusk was falling purple across the dead land. What about Briggs? What about him? You can't take him on direct. Man's been here 8 years. The hands, trust him. I don't need to take him on. Margaret pulled the ledger she'd carried from the study closer. The numbers will do that for me. She opened it to January, 2 years back. Look at this. Your inventory shows 2,000 head flipped to December. 11 months later, 1,500, but your sales receipts. She pulled out a stack of papers from between the pages. Only 300 sold. Where'd the other 200 go? Samuel leaned forward. His shadow fell across the pages. Theft or creative bookkeeping, either way. At current prices, that's $3,000 gone. She turned more pages. And that's just cattle. Haven't looked at grain, hay, equipment purchases. Jesus Christ, he's not going to help. But I can... Margaret closed the ledger. I need those 90 days. I need access to everything. And I need you to let me work without interference. And Briggs, let him think I'm just playing house. Men like him never suspect a woman knows numbers until the numbers are around their neck like a noose. Samuel pushed back from the table, stood, walked to the window, hands braced on the sink. Outside, lanterns were lighting in the bunkhouse. Laughter carried on the wind. My wife, he said to the window, spent her days planning dinner parties, ordering china from catalogs, writing letters to friends back east about how primitive it was out here. I'm not her. No. He turned. You're not. All right. 90 days. We do this your way. I'll need one more thing. Name it. Margaret stood, came around the table, close enough to see the dust in the creases of his shirt. That gun in your desk drawer. Teach me to use it. You'd think it'll come to that? I think a man who's stolen thousands won't stop because I asked nice. Samuel reached out, stopped just short of touching her shoulder. His hand hung there, suspended. Briggs has friends, other ranchers who might not like what you find. Then we'd better find it fast. Margaret stepped back, his hand dropping. I'll need all the ledgers. Tonight, Before he has time to destroy anything, I'll get them." He headed for the door, stopped. "Why'd you really come, West Truth, this time?" Margaret considered lying. Easier that way, but they'd promised honesty. "My father drank himself to death, left debts. Men who wanted payment in ways that had nothing to do with money." She kept her voice flat, matter of fact. Mrs. Whitmore's advertisement seemed better than the alternatives. "And now I'm here, and your books need fixing, and that's enough for today." Samuel nodded, left. Margaret stood alone in the kitchen that stank of mice and neglect. Through the window, she watched him head for the barn, watched Briggs emerge, the two men talking, Samuel's hand gesturing at the house. She pulled the ledger closer, opened it to a random page, more changed numbers, more theft. The scale of it was staggering. This wasn't just skimming. This was systematic destruction. A board creaked overhead. Margaret froze. Samuel was outside. She could see him, still talking to Briggs. Another creak. Footsteps. In the study directly above the kitchen, someone was in the house. Margaret's hand found the kitchen knife. Greasy handle, slick against her palm. The footsteps moved across the study floor above, lighter than Briggs, quicker than Samuel. She edged toward the stairs, knife low against her skirt. The third step would creak. She remembered from before. She stretched her leg over it, weight balanced on the banister. The footsteps stopped, paper rustling now. Someone going through the ledgers she'd left open. Margaret reached the landing. The study door stood ajar, lamplight flickering through the gap. She could smell something sweet, hair pomade, not the tobacco and sweat she'd expected. She pushed the door wider with her foot. A young man stood at the desk, maybe 20, clean-shaven, ranch hands closed, but too clean, like he'd put on his Sunday best for breaking and entering. He had papers in his hand, the receipts she'd been comparing. "Looking for something?" Margaret kept the knife visible. The boy jumped, papers scattering. "Jesus, ma'am, I didn't know I was here, or didn't think I'd catch you. Mr. Briggs sent me." The words tumbled out fast. "Said to get some papers he forgot. Said you wouldn't mind." "Did he?" Margaret stepped into the room. The boy backed against the desk. "Which papers exactly? The ones about—" He stopped. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Just some receipts? The ones that show he's been stealing?" The boy's face drained white. "I don't know nothing about that." "No." Margaret set the knife on a shelf, kept her hand near it. "What's your name?" "Tommy. Tommy Garrett." "Well, Tommy Garrett, you're not a very good liar." She moved closer. He smelled of lye soap and fear sweat. "How long you been working here?" "2 years, ma'am." "And how long you been helping Briggs doctor the books?" Tommy's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I can't. He'll what fire you hurt you." Margaret picked up one of the scattered receipts. "Or will he just stop paying you extra to keep quiet about the cattle that disappear?" The boy started crying, not sobbing, just tears running silent down his face. "My sister's sick. Doc won't treat her without payment. Mr. Briggs, he gives me extra when when you what?" "When I help move the cattle, middle of the night, move them to the far pastures. Then he sells them to Henderson Ranch. Only reports half the sale." Margaret's chest went tight. Henderson. Samuel had mentioned him. Neighboring rancher, always buying stock. "How many cattle?" 20. 30 head at a time, once a month, sometimes more." "For how long?" "Since I started, maybe longer. 2 years minimum." At 30 head a month, that was over 700 cattle. At current prices. "Tommy." Samuel's voice came from downstairs. The boy went rigid. Margaret grabbed his arm. "You tell Mr. Cross the truth. I'll make sure you keep your job. You run. Briggs will sell you out anyway to save himself." He'll kill me. No, he'll run. Men like Briggs always run when the numbers catch up. Samuel's boots on the stairs. He appeared in the doorway, took in the scene, Tommy crying, Margaret's grip on his arm, the scattered papers. "Tom's got something to tell you," Margaret said. The boy looked at her, then at Samuel. His whole body shook. "Mr. Cross, I've been helping Briggs steal from you." Samuel went still as stone. "Go on," Tommy talked. The words came in rushes and stops, but he told it all. The midnight cattle moves, the doctored receipts, the payments to keep quiet, Henderson buying stolen stock, knowing they were stolen, getting them cheap. "There's more," Tommy said when he finished. "The water rights. Briggs has been selling them to Morrison, telling you they expired." "Morrison." Samuel's voice was flat as hammered iron. "My wife's cousin." "Yes, sir. He knew you wouldn't check. Not with—" Tommy stopped. "Not with my wife dead. Not with me grieving." Samuel walked to the window. Outside, the bunkhouse lights still burned. "How many others know?" "Just me and Briggs, far as I know. Maybe Cookie. But he don't say nothing to nobody." Samuel turned. "You go back to the bunkhouse. You say nothing. You act normal." "Yes, sir." "And Tommy, you try to run. I'll hunt you down myself." The boy fled. His boots clattered on the stairs. The front door banged. Margaret began gathering the scattered papers. "You believe him? Tommy's not smart enough to lie that detailed." Samuel picked up a receipt, stared at it. 700 head. "Christ!" "More than that." Margaret pulled out the ledger she'd been studying. "Look, January, 2 years back. Inventory says 2,000. But if we count the reported sales, reported losses, and what should be natural increase from calving—" She grabbed a pencil, started calculating on the margin. "You should have close to 3,000 head now. How many do you actually have? Maybe 1,800, if that. So we're missing 1,200 cattle at $15 a head. That's $18,000. Samuel sat heavy in the desk chair. "That's more than the ranch made in profit the last 3 years combined." "Because it was your profit. Briggs just redirected it." Margaret opened another ledger, this one from 3 years back. The handwriting was different in the early pages, neater, more feminine. "Your wife kept books at first. Tried to. First year we were married, she tried." The entries were simple but accurate. Cattle counts, supply purchases, wages paid. Then the handwriting changed. Briggs took over. "When did she stop?" "When she got sick the first time. Summer before she died. Briggs offered to help." Margaret traced the entries with her finger. The theft started small. $10 here, 20 there, testing, then bigger, bolder. He was planning this, waiting for his chance. My wife dying was his opportunity. Your grief was— Margaret set down the ledger. "Men like Briggs, they're patient. They wait until you're weak, then they feast." Samuel stood abrupt, walked to the door. "I'm going to kill him." "No." Margaret's voice came sharp. "You kill him. You hang. Then the ranch goes to creditors and nobody wins except the buzzards." "Then what?" "We build a case, document everything. Then we go to the territorial marshal with proof." She pulled out a fresh ledger. "Blank pages waiting. I need 3 days, maybe 4, to trace every transaction, every theft. He won't give us 3 days, not after Tommy talked. He will if he doesn't know Tommy talked." Samuel turned. "You want me to pretend nothing's changed?" "I want you to act like a man whose new wife is meddling where she shouldn't. Be annoyed with me, publicly. Let Briggs think you're on his side, while you do what I came here to do. Fix your books." Margaret opened the fresh ledger, wrote across the top Cross Ranch, true accounts. "But first, I need to see the water rights documents, the originals. not what Briggs shows you. They're in the safe. Downstairs, behind my mother's portrait. They went down together. The portrait hung in the parlor. Severe woman in black, eyes that followed. Samuel swung it aside on hidden hinges. The safe behind was modern. Combination lock. 27, 36, 12, Samuel said, working the dial. Inside papers tied with string, gold coins in a leather pouch, a woman's ring with a stone big as a thumbnail. Samuel pulled out the papers, handed them to Margaret. She untied the string, spread them on the dusty settee. Water rights, dated 1868, signed and witnessed. These don't expire for another 15 years. Briggs said the territorial authority changed the terms. Briggs lied. Margaret found what she was looking for, the official seal, the registration number. These are perpetual rights. They run with the land. Only way to lose them is to sell them. Which I didn't. Which you didn't sign for. But she pulled out another document. Someone did. Look, a transfer document dated 6 months ago. Samuel's signature at the bottom, except I didn't sign this. No, but it looks like you did. Margaret held it up to the lamp. See the hesitation marks here and here. Someone traced your signature from something else. Morrison, that son of a bitch. And Briggs supplied the signature to trace. Margaret folded the documents. This is conspiracy. Fraud. Federal crime if we can prove it. A door slammed outside. Boots on the porch. Heavy ones. Briggs pushed through the front door without knocking. His face was red, cheek bulged with fresh tobacco. Boss, we got a problem. It's Samuel turned slow. What kind of problem? That new bull. Found him down. Looks like bloat. Bloat! Samuel's voice gave away nothing. In a healthy bull. Happens sometimes. Need to deal with him tonight before he pollutes the water. Margaret watched Briggs' hands. The right one kept touching his belt, near where a knife would hang. I'll come look, Samuel said. No need. Briggs spat into his palm, wiped it on his pants. Just need your say-so to put him down? That bull cost $300. Dead bull costs more if the herd gets sick. Samuel looked at Margaret. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Leave him till morning, Samuel said. If he's still on, we'll decide then. Briggs's jaw worked. Your call, boss. But if we lose more cattle, we've lost enough cattle already, don't you think? The words hung there. Briggs's eyes flicked to Margaret, back to Samuel. Don't know what you mean. Just saying we should be careful. Times are tight. Yeah. Briggs backed toward the door. Real tight. I'll check the bull again at dawn. He left. Margaret waited until his footsteps faded, then went to the window. Briggs wasn't heading to the barn or bunkhouse. He was going to the tool shed. He's getting ready to run, she said. Or fight. Margaret watched Briggs emerge from the shed. He carried something wrapped in canvas. The shape was wrong for tools. Too long, too careful how he held it. Samuel! Her voice came out steady as she could make it. I think Briggs just armed himself with more than a knife. 3 weeks. Margaret's fingers were permanent black from ink. Her back screamed from hunching over ledgers, and she documented $8,000 in theft. Briggs kept his distance, watching from the barn. That canvas-wrapped bundle never far from his hands. This morning was different. Margaret stood at the kitchen window, coffee cooling in her cup. Samuel was already out with the hands, moving cattle to the eastern pasture. Briggs had ridden out before dawn to town. Tommy had whispered to meet with Morrison. The dead garden stretched below the window. Gray soil, broken stakes, the ghost of what might have been. Margaret set down her cup. She had 4 hours, maybe 5, before Briggs returned. The tool shed smelled of rust and mouse droppings. She found what she needed, a shovel with a cracked handle. Wire mesh rolled in the corner, timber pieces from some abandoned project. The wheelbarrow's wheel wobbled but held. Margaret started digging where the old roses had been. The top layer was dust, but 6 inches down, the soil changed, darker, still held moisture. The roses had died from lack of water, not poisoned earth. "What are you doing?" Tommy stood in the garden gate, hat in his hands. "Building something?" Margaret kept digging. "You going to help or report to Briggs?" "Briggs is gone to town." "I know." Tommy came closer. "That looks like a water trap. My ma used to build them back in Kansas. Your mother was smart." Margaret hit something solid. Wood, old planking someone had buried. She scraped dirt away, exposed what looked like an old foundation. What was here before Mr. Cross's mother had a greenhouse. Burned down 10 years back. The foundation was solid brick, mostly intact. Margaret traced its outline with the shovel, 20 feet by 12. Big enough for vegetables year-round if she could capture enough water. "Get me those timber pieces," she told Tommy. They worked without talking. Tommy hauled timber while Margaret measured and planned. The ranch sat on a grade, slight but enough. Water ran off toward the creek, taking topsoil with it. But if she could interrupt that flow, create catch basins. "Tommy, I need every piece of scrap lumber you can find. Cookie's got old crates behind the kitchen. Get them." Samuel appeared around noon, dust in every crease of his clothes. He stopped at the garden gate, watched Margaret driving stakes into the ground, Tommy stretching wire between them. "What is this water management?" Margaret didn't stop working. Sweat ran into her eyes, stinging. "Rain runs off this slope. I'm going to catch it. We don't get much rain. Then we can't afford to waste what we get." She drove another stake. The hammer was too heavy, made her shoulders burn. "Your mother had a greenhouse here. How'd you know that? Foundation still good, could rebuild, use it for winter vegetables." Samuel came into the garden, boots careful between her stakes. "With what money? With what we save when we stop buying vegetables from Morrison's store at triple markup." Margaret straightened, vertebrae popping. "I've been through the purchase receipts. You're paying Denver prices for goods that come from farms 10 miles away. Morrison's the only store that extends credit. Because Morrison knows Briggs is stealing from you. They're both getting rich on your misfortune." As Samuel picked up a piece of the old planking, charred on one edge. "Fire took the greenhouse, took my mother too. She was trying to save her seedlings." Margaret stopped hammering. "I'm sorry. Long time ago." He set down the plank. "You need more hands for this." "I need to go to town. Today." "Briggs is in town." "I know." Margaret pulled off her work gloves. Blisters had formed and burst across both palms. "I need supplies, seeds, wire, and I need to close your account at Morrison's. He won't let you. Woman can't close a man's account. Watch me." Samuel studied her face. Dirt caked in the lines around her eyes, in the creases of her neck. "I'll come with you." "No. This needs to be me alone. Briggs needs to think you don't support what I'm doing. And if he confronts you, then everyone sees him threaten a woman in broad daylight." As Margaret started toward the house, "I need to wash, and I need those ledgers showing what Morrison really owes you versus what he says you owe him." The ride to town took 2 hours. Margaret drove the wagon herself, ledgers in a canvas bag beside her. Her good dress, the only other dress besides the brown serge, was pressed and clean. She'd even found an old hat of the first Mrs. Cross's, black with a narrow brim, respectable, armor. Willow Creek's main street was busy for a Thursday. Freight wagons lined up at the depot, cowboys spending wages at the saloon. Morrison's dry goods dominated the corner, painted signs promising best price, finest goods. Margaret parked the wagon directly in front, let everyone see her arrive. The store smelled of pickle brine and coffee. Morrison stood behind the counter, thin as a knife blade, counting coins into his till. 3 women examined fabric at the far counter. They looked up when Margaret entered, whispered behind their hands. "Mrs. Cross?" Morrison's smile was oil on water. "How nice to finally meet you." "Mr. Morrison." Margaret set her canvas bag on his counter, heavy. The ledgers made a solid thump. "I'm here to settle my husband's account." "Women don't settle accounts. This one does." Margaret pulled out the first ledger, opened it to a marked page. "According to your bills, Cross Ranch owes you $600. $632 with interest." "Interesting." Margaret pulled out a second ledger. "Because according to these receipts, you've been charging Cross Ranch 3 times market rate for basic goods." Morrison's smile flickered. "Delivery costs, distance fees." "The Johnson Ranch is 5 miles farther. They pay half what we do." She opened another ledger. "The Mitchell place, same distance, pays standard rates. Different arrangements. Yes, they don't have Briggs doctoring their books." Margaret's voice carried now. The women at the fabric counter had stopped pretending to shop. "Sugar, 10 cents a pound at wholesale. You charge Cross Ranch 30 cents. Flour, same markup. Coffee, beans, salt, everything triple. If Mr. Cross has concerns about pricing, Mr. Cross's concern is fraud." Margaret pulled out the water rights document. "Like this. Transfer of water rights to you, supposedly signed by my husband." Morrison's face drained. "That's legal. Proper witnessed. By Briggs, who's been stealing cattle for 2 years." She pulled out more papers. Cattle sold to Henderson Ranch. Henderson paid full price. Briggs reported half. Guess who helped fence the stolen stock? The bell over the door jangled. Briggs entered, stopped when he saw Margaret. "Well now." He spat tobacco juice into the brass spittoon by the door. "Lady's been busy." "Mr. Briggs." Margaret didn't turn. "We were just discussing your career in forgery." The store went silent. Even the street noise seemed to fade. Briggs walked forward, boots deliberate on the wood floor. The canvas-wrapped bundle hung from his belt. "Careful with accusations, dear woman." "Not accusations, facts." Margaret pulled out Tommy's written confession, signed and witnessed by Samuel. "Tommy Garrett says different. Says you've been mowing cattle at night. Says Morrison here helps fence them through Henderson. Tommy's a drunk and a liar. Tommy's been sober 2 years. You're thinking of his father." Margaret turned to face Briggs. This close. She could see the veins in his eyes, the tobacco stains in his beard. "Just like you thought nobody would check the books after Mrs. Cross died." Briggs's hand moved to the canvas bundle. "Pull that gun in my store." "I'll have you arrested," Morrison said quick. Gun. So that's what Briggs had taken from the shed. Not planning to shoot nobody. Briggs smiled. Yellow teeth, gaps where he'd lost fights. Just want the lady to understand her position. "My position?" Margaret pulled out the final document. "My position is accountant for Cross Ranch, and as accountant, I'm closing our credit account here. Effective immediately. You can't. I can. I did. And I'm filing fraud charges with the territorial marshal." She turned to the women at the fabric counter. "Mrs. Henderson, you might want to ask your husband about the cattle he's been buying cheap from Briggs." "Mrs. Johnson, that drought relief fund you've been contributing to Morrison's been skimming it." The women gasped. Morrison's, "No, that's not Ledger 3, pages 40 through 50. Every contribution recorded, every disbursement tracked, except the disbursements are 30% less than contributions. You're lying. Numbers don't lie. Margaret gathered her ledgers. Precise movements. But men do, especially men who think women can't read accounts. She headed for the door. Briggs didn't move aside. "Excuse me, Mr. Briggs." "Make me." Margaret looked him direct in the eyes. "You're going to move, because if you don't, I'll scream. And when the marshal comes, I'll show him everything. Every receipt and every forged signature, every stolen cow. You got no proof, yeah. I have Tommy, I have the ledgers, and I have this." She pulled out a paper from her bag. "Your signature on cattle sales to Henderson, same hand that forged my husband's signature on the water rights. See the loop on the is the tail on the G identical." Briggs' face went dark. His hand tightened on the canvas bundle. "Go ahead," Margaret said quiet. "Shoot a woman in front of witnesses. See how that works out for you." The door burst open. Samuel stood there, the marshal beside him. "Afternoon, Briggs," the marshal said. "Here you got some explaining to do." Briggs looked at Margaret, at Samuel, at the marshal. His jaw worked the tobacco like he was chewing the words. "This ain't over." "Yes," Margaret said. "It is." Briggs pushed past Samuel, out into the street. The marshal followed. Through the window, Margaret watched them argue. Briggs gesturing wild, the marshal's hand resting on his pistol. "You planned this," Morrison said. "I planned to buy seeds." Yet Margaret pulled out a different purse. Her own money, saved from Chicago. "You have any for sale, or should I take my business to the other store?" Morrison's mouth opened, closed. The women from the fabric counter were already heading for the door, no doubt racing to spread the news. "What seeds?" Morrison's voice came out strangled. "Corn, beans, squash, whatever grows in alkaline soils." Margaret counted out coins. "And I'll need 20 pounds of wire. Delivered tomorrow." Morrison wrote up the order, hands shaking. Through the window, Margaret could see the marshal walking Briggs toward the jail. Samuel stood by their wagon, watching. "Anything else?" Morrison asked. Margaret looked at the shelves behind him, saw something that made her stomach drop. A jar of preserves with a familiar label. Her own handwriting from last autumn in Chicago. The batch she'd made for Mrs. Paulson's boarding house. The last batch before she'd answered the mail-order bride advertisement. Morrison followed her gaze. "Those came in last month. Special order from Chicago." Which meant someone was still sending her preserves west. Someone who knew where she'd gone. Someone who might still be looking for her. 6 weeks since Briggs sat in the Willow Creek jail. 6 weeks of Margaret's hands in soil. Building water catches from scrap lumber and determination. The corn stood knee-high in rows straight as ledger lines. Beans climbed poles made from old fence posts. The ranch hands who'd mocked woman's work now came asking advice about their own garden patches. Margaret straightened from weeding, vertebrae cracking. The sun beat down through her mother's old straw hat. She'd found it in the attic, along with other remnants of the first Mrs. Cross. Sweat ran between her breasts, soaked the chemise under her work dress. Samuel was out with the hands, counting the herd. Real counts this time, witnessed by 3 men, recorded in Margaret's careful hand, 1,843 head, including new calves. The numbers were finally true. Dust rose on the eastern road, single rider, moving fast. Margaret wiped her hands on her apron, watched the rider approach. Not a ranch hand. The horse was too fine. A bay that caught the light like polished wood. The man riding it wore a city suit despite the heat. He dismounted at the gate, tied his horse with practiced efficiency. Older man, 50 maybe, gray threaded through dark hair slicked back with pomade. His boots had never touched cow shit. Mrs. Cross. Yes, Marcus Cornwall. He pulled papers from his jacket. I'm here to speak with Samuel about an old debt. Cornwall. The name hit her gut cold. She'd seen it in the oldest ledgers. From before Samuel's marriage. Failed copper mine in Montana. Samuel had lost $12,000 when it went bust. My husband's with the herd. Then I'll wait. Cornwall walked through the gate without invitation, eyes scanning the garden. Industrious little thing, aren't you? Margaret didn't answer. She pulled off her work gloves, skin underneath white and puckered from sweat. There's water at the well if you're thirsty. I didn't come for water. He held up the papers. I came for payment, $20,000, plus interest. The mine investment was $12,000. Cornwall's eyebrows rose. Been going through Samuel's papers. How modern. He unfolded the documents. $12,000 principal, $8,000 in interest and penalties, all properly documented. Margaret took the papers, legal language dense as smoke. But she found what she was looking for. Date, 5 years ago. Signature, Samuel Cross. The signature was wrong. She'd been staring at Samuel's signature for 6 weeks. The real one had a sharp downstroke on the C, a particular curl on the final S. This signature was close, but the C was too round, the S too careful. This is forged, Cornwall laughed. That's Samuel's signature. I watched him sign it. No, you didn't. Margaret studied the document closer. The paper felt wrong, too new. The ink hadn't aged the way 5-year-old ink should. This was written recently. Within the last month, I'd guess. You're saying I'm a fraud. I'm saying this document is. She found another tell. The date format. European style. Day before month. Samuel always wrote month first. Who helped you, Briggs? Cornwall's face didn't change, but his hand twitched toward his pocket. Briggs is in jail. For now. But he had friends. Morrison, for one. Margaret thought about the preserves in Morrison's store. The ones from Chicago. Or maybe you had other help. Someone from back east who knew I was here. I don't know what you're talking about. But he did. She could see it in the way his eyes shifted, the slight lean backward. Mr. Cornwall, how did you know Samuel had remarried? Word travels. From Chicago. His hand moved to his pocket again. This time he pulled out a telegram. Your previous employer sends his regards. The paper shook in Margaret's hand. Margaret Thornton, now cross-located. Stop husband owes Cornwall. 20,000 stop, collect or expose her theft. Stop. Paulson, her last employer in Chicago. The one who'd fired her when he discovered she was a woman. The one who'd claimed she'd stolen money to cover his own embezzlement. He's lying. Maybe. Cornwall took back the telegram. But scandal's a funny thing. Doesn't matter what's true, only what people believe. Mail-order bride turns out to be a thief Samuel would never recover. How much is Paulson paying you? 20% of whatever I collect. Cornwall smiled, plus expenses. Your former employer is very motivated to see you ruined because she knew where he'd hidden his theft. In accounts marked as charitable donations, same trick Morrison had been pulling. Hoofbeats approached. Samuel rode in hard. Tommy beside him. They dismounted fast. Samuel's face dark as storm clouds. Cornwall. Samuel. Been too long. Not long enough. Samuel looked at the papers in Margaret's hand. What's this? Your debt. Cornwall said, from the mine. That debt was settled in bankruptcy court. The equipment debt was not the personal loan. Cornwall pulled out another document. You borrowed $5,000 from me, separate from the mine investment, to cover your father's medical bills. Samuel went still. That was paid. Prove it. Margaret read the new document. Same forged signature, same wrong date format, but this one had a witness signature. Morrison. Morrison witnessed this loan. He did, willing to testify to it. The trap was neat. Even if they proved forgery, it would be Cornwall and Morrison's word against Samuel's. Two respected businessmen against a rancher who just accused them of theft. How much to make this go away? Samuel asked. 20,000, or the ranch? The ranch is worth 3 times that, not with liens against it, not with your reputation destroyed. Cornwall folded the papers. You have 1 week to decide. Margaret's mind raced through the ledgers she'd memorized. Cross Ranch had maybe 3,000 in cash reserves. The cattle would bring 15,000 at market, but not for months. The land itself. We need time, she said. 1 week, 1 month. And Cornwall looked at her. 2 weeks. And Mrs. Cross comes to town with me now. As insurance? No, Samuel said. It's all right. Margaret pulled off her garden apron. Mr. Cornwall and I can discuss terms while you arrange the money. Margaret. She met Samuel's eyes, willed him to trust her. 2 weeks is reasonable. Mr. Cornwall's a businessman. He wants his money, not violence. Cornwall smiled. Exactly. Though accidents do happen. Your foreman discovered that. Briggs is in jail. Was in jail. Released yesterday. Seems witness Tommy Garrett disappeared. Margaret's chest went tight. She looked at Tommy, still mounted. You're Tommy. Yes, ma'am. Then who? My cousin. Tommy said quiet. Briggs got to him. Paid him to leave town. Without witness, Marshall had to release Briggs. Samuel's hand went to his gun. Where is he? Nobody knows. Cornwall said, but I'd guess he's nearby. Man like that holds grudges. The wind picked up, rattling the bean poles Margaret had set that morning. Everything she'd built, everything she'd planted, suddenly felt fragile as paper. I'll come to town, Margaret said, but I need to gather some things. 5 minutes. She went to the house, Samuel following, in the kitchen. She pulled him close, whispered, fast. The signatures are forged. Same tells as the water rights. The ink's too fresh, paper's too new, but I need proof. How? The original papers, if they exist, would be in Cornwall's hotel room or Morrison's safe. She pulled the seed money purse from behind the flour tin. Use this to hire someone to search, quietly. I'm not leaving you alone with Cornwall. You have to. If he thinks we're working together, he'll run. Margaret grabbed the account ledgers she'd been keeping. These show the ranch is profitable now. Maybe the bank will loan against future earnings. No bank loans to ranchers married to thieves. I didn't steal anything. Doesn't matter if Paulson says you did. Margaret looked out the window. Cornwall stood by his horse, checking a pocket watch. There's something else. The preserves in Morrison's store. My preserves from Chicago. Someone's been tracking me. Samuel's jaw tightened. Paulson or someone working for him. She gathered the ledgers into her canvas bag. Samuel, if something happens, nothing's going to happen. If it does, the garden knows how to grow now. The water catches work. The ranch will survive. I don't give a damn about the ranch. Margaret stopped. Samuel's hand caught her wrist. Gentle but firm. His thumb found her pulse point. Margaret, I need you to hear this. Footsteps on the porch. Cornwall's voice? Time's up. Samuel let go. Margaret walked past him, out into the bright sun where Cornwall waited. She climbed into his rented buggy, canvas bag heavy in her lap. As they drove away, she turned for one look back. Samuel stood in the garden she'd built, between the corn rows, his figure dark against the green. That's when she saw the smoke, rising from the eastern pasture, black and spreading. The pasture where the herd was grazing, where 1,843 head of cattle were worth everything. Cornwall saw it too. He smiled. Looks like Briggs decided not to wait. Today. Cornwall's buggy hit every rut between the ranch and town. Margaret's teeth ached from clenching, her hands white-knuckled on the canvas bag. Behind them, smoke billowed black across the eastern sky. Samuel would be riding toward it now, toward 1,800 cattle and fire. Briggs is predictable, Cornwall said. Herd a man's money, he burns what you love. The cattle are Samuel's livelihood. The garden was yours. Margaret's stomach dropped. The corn, the beans, the water catches she'd built with bleeding hands. Oh, he won't torch the garden. Not yet. Cornwall flicked the reins. He needs you to watch it die slow, like you made him watch his life crumble. Town appeared ahead, buildings wavering in heat shimmer. The main street was crowded for a Monday. Word traveled fast about fires. Ranchers who'd lose everything if the flames spread. Merchants who'd lose customers if the ranches failed. Cornwall stopped the buggy at the bank. Inside, the bank smelled of tobacco and pomade. Men clustered at the window, watching smoke rise in the distance. They turned when Margaret entered, whispers starting immediate. Gentlemen, Territorial Judge Harrison sat behind the manager's desk, his Morrison beside him. Mrs. Cross has arrived. A trial. They'd arranged a trial without telling her. This isn't legal, Margaret said. This is a hearing on debt collection. Morrison pulled out papers. Mr. Cornwall has legitimate claims. We're here to determine payment terms. Margaret set her canvas bag on the desk. Heavy. The ledgers inside had everything. Proof of Morrison's theft, Briggs's cattle rustling, Cornwall's forgery. But without Tommy as witness, without Samuel here. The door burst open. 3 women entered, Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Johnson, and Emma. The young mail-order bride from that first day, number 4, the pretty blonde Jacobson had claimed. We're here to speak for Mrs. Cross, Mrs. Henderson said. Morrison stood. Women don't testify in financial matters. We're not testifying. Mrs. Johnson pulled out a paper. We're filing charges against you, Mr. Morrison. The paper shook in her gloved hand. Theft! You've been stealing from the Drought Relief Fund. Mrs. Cross showed us the proof. Those are lies. Then prove it. Emma stepped forward. Her voice was small but steady. Open your books. Show us where the money went. Morrison's face went red. This is Cornwall's hearing, not actually. Judge Harrison interrupted. If there are criminal charges, those take precedence. And Margaret opened her canvas bag, pulled out the ledgers. Her fingers found the pages she'd marked. Judge Harrison, these books show systematic theft over 3 years. From Cross Ranch, from the Relief Fund, from 6 other ranches that trusted Morrison's accounting. You can't prove. I can. She opened the first ledger. Morrison's own handwriting. Look, January, $300 into the Relief Fund. But here. She flipped pages. Disbursement records show only 200 paid out. Where's the other 100? Cornwall grabbed for the ledger. Margaret pulled it back. But his fingers caught the binding. Pages tore, numbers scattering. Those prove nothing without authentication. Then let's authenticate them. The voice came from the door. Samuel stood there, covered in soot, shirt burned through at the shoulder, but whole, alive. Behind him, Tommy and 4 ranch hands, all smoke blackened. The fire? Margaret's voice came out raw, controlled, lost maybe 50 head. Samuel walked forward, boots leaving ash prints. Briggs didn't count on the wind shifting, drove the flames back toward him. Where is he? Running. last I saw, but that's not important. Samuel pulled papers from his shirt. What's important is these original documents. Margaret recognized them immediate. The real loan papers from the copper mine investment. Samuel's actual signature bold at the bottom. Found these in Morrison's safe, Samuel said, along with this. A telegram, dated 2 days ago. Payment received. Stop end arrangement with Cornwall. Stop. No longer interested in M. Thornton. Stop. Paulson. Paulson sold you out, Samuel told Cornwall. Got a better offer from someone else? You're here on your own now. Yet Cornwall's hand moved toward his jacket. Judge Harrison's voice cracked sharp. Pull that gun. I'll see you hang. The room went still. Cornwall's hand dropped. Margaret spread the torn ledger pages across the desk, even damaged. The numbers told their story. Judge, I can prove everything. The theft, the forgery, all of it. But I need you to listen. I'm listening. She began with the cattle. Tommy's testimony about midnight moves, backed by receipts. Henderson Ranch buying stolen stock. Payments traced through Morrison's store. Then the water rights, the forged signatures, the pattern of theft that started small and grew. The final proof is here. She pulled out the newest ledger, the one she'd kept. Cross Ranch. True accounts. Every transaction verified, every number checked 3 times. The ranch is profitable. Has been for 6 weeks since Briggs went to jail. That doesn't prove, Mr. Morrison. Margaret turned to face him. You have a scar on your left palm. Knife wound from butchering. You told people, but it's really from practicing Samuel's signature. The knife slipped when you were tracing 3 weeks ago. Same date you bought those preserves from Chicago. Morrison's left hand clenched involuntary. You knew Paulson. You were corresponding with him, helping track me. She pulled out the preserve jar she'd hidden in her bag, her handwriting on the label. This was your mistake. Paulson sent these to mark I was here, but he didn't know I'd stopped making preserves months before leaving Chicago. This label is forged like everything else you touch. Judge Harrison stood, walked around the desk, studied the documents, the ledgers, the signatures. Mrs. Cross, what's your training in accounting? My father was a bookkeeper. Taught me from age 12. I kept books for 3 Chicago firms before... She stopped. Before they discovered I was a woman. And Paulson accused you of theft to cover his own embezzlement, which I can prove. If anyone cares to telegraph Chicago. The judge was quiet. The room filled with breathing. Boot shuffles. The tick of the bank clock. Mr. Cornwall, the judge said finally, your claims are dismissed. The signatures are clearly forged. Mr. Morrison, you're under arrest for theft, conspiracy, and fraud. Morrison tried to run. Tommy caught him at the door, threw him hard against the wall. Plaster cracked. There's more, Samuel said. Briggs set the fire. We have witnesses. Add arson to the charges. The judge turned to Margaret. Mrs. Cross, the territory owes you thanks for uncovering this conspiracy. I don't want thanks. Margaret gathered her ledgers, hands steady now. I want the water rights returned, the stolen cattle money recovered, and Morrison's store liquidated to pay back everyone he robbed. Done. Cornwall hadn't moved from his chair. What about me? You leave Wyoming. Tonight. If I see you again, I'll charge you as accomplice. Cornwall stood, straightened his coat, looked at Margaret with something that might have been respect. You're wasted on ranching. No. Margaret held Samuel's eyes. I'm exactly where I belong. Cornwall left. Morrison was dragged to jail. The crowd dispersed, whispers following. The 3 women who'd stood for Margaret each pressed her hand before leaving. Then it was just Margaret and Samuel in the bank, ash still falling from his clothes. The herd. Safe. Most of them, Tommy and the boys cut a fire break. He stepped closer. Soot and sweat, leather and smoke. Margaret, the garden, standing, every beanpole, every cornrow. Her knees went weak. Samuel caught her arms, held her upright. His thumbs found the pulse points at her wrists, the same gesture from this morning that felt like years ago. Margaret, I need to ask you something. The answer's yes. He smiled. First real smile she'd seen from him. You don't know the question. Doesn't matter. Whatever you're asking. Yes. Marry me. Real this time. Not because I bought your passage. Not because you need protection. His hands moved to frame her face, rough palms gentle against her cheeks. Because you saved everything I thought was lost, son. Because you see numbers where I see chaos. Because she kissed him, tasted smoke and coffee and something that might have been hope. His arms came around her, crushing the ledgers between them, pages of truth pressed against their hearts. When they broke apart, she saw movement through the window, a rider on the horizon to cool, coming fast. The horse was familiar, the man riding it more so. Briggs, coming back, and this time the canvas-wrapped bundle was in his hands, not on his belt. Get behind the counter. Samuel's voice came flat as hammered steel. Margaret didn't move. Through the bank window, Briggs dismounted, the canvas bundle cradled like a baby. His clothes were scorched, his left hand wrapped in a dirty rag, burned from his own fire. Margaret, behind the counter, now. No. She stepped toward the door instead. He's here for me. Samuel caught her arm. You don't know? I know he lost everything because I found the truth. She pulled free. Let me talk to him. The door swung open. Briggs filled the frame, bigger than she remembered, face twisted with something beyond rage. The canvas bundle stayed low at his side. Mrs. Cross, he said it like spitting poison, come to finish destroying a man. You destroyed yourself. I worked that ranch 8 years. 8 years of my life in that dirt. His burned hand twitched. Then you show up, fatco who can read numbers, and suddenly I'm nothing. Margaret felt Samuel tense beside her. She pressed her hand back, warning him still. You stole $18,000. I earned it, every penny, keeping that ranch running while he mourned his precious wife. Briggs's eyes cut to Samuel. You were useless after she died. Drinking, wandering the house at night, talking to her ghost. Who kept the cattle fed? Who managed the hands? Who stole from the man who trusted you? Briggs lifted the canvas bundle. Margaret's chest went tight. But instead of unwrapping it, he set it on the bank counter, gentle, like it might break. You want to know what this is? He pulled back the canvas. Not a gun, not a rifle. Books, account ledgers, older than any she'd seen. The leather covers cracked, pages yellow as old teeth. Your husband's father kept these? As Briggs opened one, the handwriting was precise, beautiful. Every transaction from when this ranch started, when it was nothing but a cabin in hope. Margaret stepped closer. The entries went back 25 years. Land purchases, cattle bought one at a time. A woman's ring bought mail order from Denver. Look at this entry. Briggs pointed to a line. Samuel Cross, born, doctor's fee, 1 yearling heifer. His father had to trade cattle to bring him into the world. Samuel moved beside Margaret, staring at his father's writing. And here, another page. School books for Samuel, traded 2 steers. Briggs's voice went raw. Man built this ranch from nothing. Died thinking his son would make it greater. He did, Margaret said. He failed. Ranch was dying when I started taking money. I kept it alive. By stealing, by managing what he couldn't. Briggs closed the ledger. I'm done here. Jail or running, doesn't matter. But you should know something. Woman. He pulled a paper from his pocket, new, the ink still dark. Bill of sale, dated yesterday, put them before the fire. Margaret read it. Her stomach dropped. You sold your information to Henderson. Everything I know about Cross Ranch, every weakness, every debt, every problem. Briggs smiled, ugly through the burns. Henderson's been wanting that land for years. Now he knows exactly how to get it. Samuel grabbed the paper. This isn't legal. Legal enough. Information's not theft. It's trade. Briggs backed toward the door. You won that battle, Mrs. Cross. But Henderson's got deep pockets and patience. He'll bleed you slow, legal and proper. We'll fight. With what money? You got 3,000 in reserve. Maybe Henderson's got 10 times that. Briggs stopped at the door. That garden you're so proud of, Henderson, owns the water upstream. All he has to do is dam it. He left. Margaret heard his horse ride away, hoofbeats fading toward the territory border. Samuel threw the bill of sale on the counter. He's right. Henderson's been waiting for this chance. Then we don't give it to him. Margaret picked up the old ledgers Briggs had left. Her fingers traced the entries. Your father built this ranch from nothing. We can protect it with something. With what? With these. She held up the ledgers. And with the women. 3 months later, the corn stood tall as a man on horseback. Margaret walked the rows, checking ears, feeling for ripeness. The silk had gone brown, the husks tight. Ready? Margaret! Emma ran through the garden gate, her blue calico dark with sweat. They're here, Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Mitchell, Mrs. Peterson, all of them. Margaret wiped her hands on her apron. Through the kitchen window, she could see wagons arriving, women climbing down, carrying baskets and ledgers. The kitchen table had been extended, with planks across sawhorses. 12 chairs borrowed from the bunkhouse. Margaret had spent the morning making coffee, cutting bread, setting out preserves she'd made from the early beans. The women filed in, faces serious. These weren't social calls anymore. These were business meetings. Ladies, Margaret stood at the head of the table. Thank you for coming. Henderson diverted the creek again, besides, Mrs. Johnson said without preamble, claimed upstream rights. Same here, Mrs. Peterson added. Our lower 40 is dry as bone. Margaret pulled out the territorial map she'd gotten from the land office. He can't divert water that feeds multiple ranches. Territory Law Section 12, Paragraph 4. How do you know that? Because I've been reading. She pulled out the law books, pages marked with strips of fabric. Every night for 3 months. Water rights, property law, territorial regulations. Reading doesn't stop Henderson. No, but this might. Margaret opened her newest ledger. Henderson's bought 6 ranches in the last 2 years. Every one. He's paid below value. Want to know how? The women leaned forward. He creates crisis, diverts water, spreads disease rumors, undercuts cattle prices. And she showed them the pattern, traced across columns and dates. Then he offers to buy, generous-like, saving desperate families. We know this, Mrs. Mitchell said, but knowing doesn't stop him. Not alone, but together. Margaret pulled out another ledger. This is Cross Ranch, current accounts. We're showing profit, small but consistent. Want to know how? She explained the water catches, the crop rotation, the direct sales to military posts instead of going through middlemen. But the real key is this. She opened the oldest ledger, Samuel's father's. Cooperative agreements. Look, 20 years ago, the ranches worked together, shared water rights, combined cattle drives, bulk purchased supplies. That was before Henderson came. Then it's time to go back to before? Margaret stood, walked to the window. In the distance, Samuel and the hands were building a new barn. The old one had burned with Briggs's fire, but the new one would be bigger, better, We form an association, but legal binding, pool our resources. Emma spoke up, quiet. Our husbands won't agree. They don't trust each other. They don't have to. We handle the books. We make the purchasing decisions. Margaret turned back to them. How many of you actually manage your ranch accounts now? 8 hands rose. And how many of your husbands know you do? The hands stayed up, but the women smiled. We meet monthly. Compare prices. Share information. If Henderson cuts one of us off from water, the others share. If he undercuts cattle prices, we hold our stock back together. That's conspiracy, Mrs. Johnson said. That's business. Margaret pulled out the final document. I've had Judge Harrison review it. Completely legal. It's called a mutual aid society. She passed the papers around. The women read, whispered, calculated. This could work, Mrs. Mitchell said slowly. But we'd need capital, initial funds to weather Henderson's first attacks. How much? 5,000 minimum? Margaret walked to the cabinet, pulled out a coffee tin. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, a bank draft, 4,800, recovery from Morrison's theft, plus sale of the stolen cattle he was hiding. That's your money. That's seed money. For all of us. The room went quiet. Outside, hammers rang on nails, building something new. Mrs. Henderson, the same Mrs. Henderson whose husband had bought stolen cattle, stood. My husband doesn't know I'm here. Neither does mine, said Mrs. Peterson. Mine doesn't like it. Mrs. Johnson smiled thin. Told him I was learning to make preserves. Are you? Margaret asked. No. I'm learning to read ledgers, to find where money disappears, to see patterns. She pulled out her own notebook, pages covered in careful numbers. Henderson's been cheating us too. Water we're supposed to share. He takes more. Grazing land we co-own. His cattle somehow always get the best grass. So we stop him. How? Margaret smiled. We audit him. 6 weeks after that, the corn came in heavy. Margaret stood in the garden, watching Samuel and the hands load wagons. The military contract she'd negotiated directly, without middlemen, would bring twice what Morrison had ever paid. 20 wagons full. Samuel came up beside her, dusty and grinning. Plus what we're keeping for seed and feed. The beans are ready too, and the squash. In 2 weeks he pulled her close, her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, hands resting on the slight swell of her belly. 3 months along, just starting to show. The water catches worked, he said into her hair. The rain had helped. Rain's just water without purpose. You gave it purpose. His hands spread across her stomach, like everything else you touch. Samuel, marry me. She laughed. We're already married. That was paper, business arrangement. He turned her to face him. I want real. Want to stand up in front of everyone and choose you. Want them to see me choose you. Margaret looked at his face. Sun-weathered, and beautiful in its certainty. When? Now. Today. The corn's in. The women are coming for the association meeting. Judge Harrison's in town. I'm wearing a work dress. There's dirt under my nails. Good. Let them see you exactly as you are. He pulled a ring from his pocket. Not the elaborate one from his mother's collection. This one was simple gold, worn smooth. This was my grandmother's. She built this ranch alongside my grandfather, worked the land until the day she died. Margaret took the ring, inside, engraved so small she had to squint, labor omnia vincit. Work conquers all, Samuel translated. Seemed fitting. They married at sunset, in the garden between the corn rows. Judge Harrison officiated. The ranch hands witnessed. The women from the association stood as bridesmaids, their own work dresses dusty from travel. Margaret wore her brown serge, the same dress from that first day. But now it fit different, taken out to accommodate the baby, hemmed shorter for working. Her hands were clean but stained, ink that wouldn't wash out, soil worked too deep. "Do you, Samuel Cross, take this woman?" "I take her for exactly who she is. Accountant, gardener, fighter of thieves, and builder of water catches, mother of whatever stubborn child we're about to have. Yes. Do you, Margaret Thornton Cross, take this man?" Margaret looked at Samuel. Behind him, the ranch spread out, profitable now, protected by law and association. The house that had been empty was full of ledgers and preserved vegetables and the smell of bread. The land that had been dying was green. I take him and everything that comes with him, every ledger, every struggle, every sunrise over corn that shouldn't grow in Wyoming but does in anyway. Yes. They kissed as the sun dropped behind the mountains, painting the garden gold. 1 year later to the day, Margaret stood in the same garden, now doubled in size. 15 women sat at tables between the bean rows, ledgers open, learning. "The trick," she said, holding her daughter on her hip, "is to always check the arithmetic twice. Once for honest mistakes, once for dishonest ones." The baby grabbed at her mother's hair, yanking. Margaret shifted her to the other hip, kept teaching. "Mrs. Cross," one of the newer women asked, "what if our husbands find out?" "Find out what? That you're educated, that you're protecting their assets, that you're smarter than they assumed." Margaret smiled. "Let them find out." Samuel appeared at the garden gate. "Ladies!" Some of the women tensed, but Samuel just walked to Margaret, kissed her temple, took the baby, teaching revolution again, teaching arithmetic, same thing. He bounced their daughter, making her laugh. "Henderson's here." The women went silent. "Let him come," Margaret said. Henderson entered the garden, hat in hand. He looked older, grayer. His empire of stolen ranches had crumbled when the association's audit revealed decades of theft. "Mrs. Cross, Mr. Henderson, I've come to propose a business arrangement. We're not interested. You haven't heard it." He pulled out papers. "I want to buy corn, your corn specifically, for my horses." Margaret almost laughed. "You want to buy from us? You grow the best corn in the territory. I need the best." He named a price. Fair, more than fair. Margaret looked at the other women. Mrs. Johnson nodded. Mrs. Mitchell shrugged. Mrs. Peterson smiled sharp. "We'll consider it," Margaret said. "The association will vote next month." Sure. Henderson's face went red. "I need an answer now." "Then the answer is no." "What?" Oh, he stood there. Powerful man made powerless by women who'd learned to read ledgers. Finally, he set the papers on the table and left. Samuel handed the baby back to Margaret. "You enjoyed that." "I enjoyed the arithmetic of it." She showed him Henderson's offer. "He's desperate. The other ranchers won't sell to him after what he did." "Will you?" Margaret looked at her garden, her students, her daughter, chewing on a ledger cover. "Maybe, if the numbers are right." She went back to teaching, Samuel beside her, the baby on her hip. The women bent over their books, learning the power of arithmetic, the truth in numbers, the revolution that comes from understanding your own worth. The corn rustled in the wind, tall and gold and impossible, but not impossible, just requiring the right work, the right water, the right woman to make it grow. The sun set over Cross Ranch, profitable, protected, and for the first time in years, truly alive. 10 years passed before I understood what Margaret Cross truly built in that Wyoming garden, not corn or beans, though those grew tall. She grew courage in women who'd been taught to stay small. Every Thursday, her kitchen filled with wives learning arithmetic, but really learning power. Mrs. Henderson left her husband when the numbers showed his debts. Emma opened her own store. Mrs. Johnson became the first female bank officer in the territory. Margaret. She kept teaching, kept planting, kept those ledgers that told truth when men preferred lies. Her daughter learned numbers before letters. The association she started spread to 3 territories, but here's what matters. She never forgot being number 10 in that line of mail-order brides. The fat one, the leftovers. She made sure no woman after her ever felt that small again. This story was inspired by historical accounts of mail-order brides in the American West, created solely for entertainment purposes. This work does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events are fictional products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The story aims to honor the strength and resilience of women who built communities under challenging circumstances.